Morning, everybody. Just about morning. There's a couple of minutes to go, but I think we've got a full house, so I'm going to kick off. So first of all, can you hear me at the back? Yes, thumbs up's good. Second of all, I've been told I have to stay within these white lines, otherwise I won't be on the film. So if I'm a little immobile, that's the only reason. A little introduction. So my name is Andy French. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Object First, and I'll talk a little bit about those at the end, but this is not a sales pitch. So I'm the English guy with the French name. I'm in the Netherlands. I've proudly got my orange shoes, which is partly to do with the Netherlands and partly to do with our branding. So I am going to talk in a few moments about why we at Object First believe that the zero trust model needs to evolve to take into account certain different use cases. But first I'm going to set the scene with a few statistics, and I'm not going to bombard you with hundreds of figures and graphs, but I will just show you a few things. And these figures come from three different bits of research. So the first one is from consultants ESG, who did a survey this year, and I'm going to draw quite extensively from that. The second one is from a great partner of ours, Veeam, the backup software company, who do an annual ransomware report. So I'm going to take a little data from them. And then the third one is from some research that we at Object First have done very recently. It's not even been published yet, so it's not even hot off the press. It's still on the press. But there's some interesting numbers from that I want to show you. So the first numbers that we're going to look at is, okay, how many organizations actually suffer ransomware attacks? And to be honest, this is one of the lower numbers that I've seen from different surveys. So ESG reckon that 66% of organizations have suffered a ransomware attack in the last 2 years. But of those 66%, 69% have suffered more than one attack, right? So you get attacked once, doesn't mean that that's it. You could well get attacked again. And another little statistic, which isn't on the chart here, but Veeam have found in their latest survey that if you pay the ransom, you're still very, very likely to get attacked again. In fact, 69% of businesses who paid the ransom got another ransomware attack. My slides are going by themselves. So the next point is that when a ransomware attack occurs, it is the backups that the criminals are going after. And this makes perfect sense because, you know, if your production data gets taken down and you can just recover straight away, no problemo. But if your backups are gone, then you're much more likely to pay the ransom. So this is why 96% of attacks, they're going after the backups. So let's look now at the impact, or some of the impacts of a ransomware attack. So the first one here is about how long would it take to get back to operations, maybe not normal operations, but getting the company operating again. And there's a lucky 10%, I'm just going to move off the line here. There's a lucky 10% up here who either don't get affected at all or could recover within a day. But everybody else, it takes many, many working days. So that's 40% of them taking up to a working week. And over half of them, it takes more than a working week to recover. And if you think about all those people in an organization sitting there twiddling their thumbs, unable to work because their systems are down, they haven't got their data, and the super stressed IT team, and we'll come to that in a moment, these attacks are devastating. And I'll tell you just an example of that in just a moment. So the other aspect that I want to look at is how much data can actually get recovered. And these guys here, 25% of them, were able, after an attack, to recover half or less of their data. And again, imagine, okay, you get up to being able to run your business again to some extent after 2 weeks, whatever, but you're still missing half your data. That's devastating. Data is the lifeblood of your business. So how are you going to grow? How are you going to keep operating normally? And now on to, and this is some data from the survey that we have done recently, which is about attitudes and the impact of attacks on IT staff and their mental health. And cybersecurity and the threat of attacks absolutely has a negative impact on the mental health and the well-being of IT workers. They feel uncomfortably stressed. Even when there isn't an attack ongoing, they feel uncomfortably stressed about the prospect of of a cybersecurity attack happening. They are scared that if there is an incident, the finger is going to be pointed at them, no matter whether it was their fault or not. So perhaps not surprisingly, nearly 60% of IT workers are either thinking about moving or are actively looking for other jobs because of that stress, right? It's just a horrible, horrible thing. So then if we look at a related statistic, that nearly 3/4 of those IT workers that we surveyed said that they don't really feel that the tech and the tools they have at their disposal, this is really, there's a ghost in the machine, sorry about this. They don't feel that they have the tech and the tools necessary to be able to recover effectively after an attack. So you put those two statistics together, the 59% and the 74%, and what you have there are the ingredients of a dangerous key person dependency. Because if these guys leave and the tools that they have, the tools that the people who are remaining have are too complicated to use, how are you going to get your backups back? How does that affect your resilience? So then we're going to look at something from the Veeam data, and this is the last bit of research that I'm going to show you. So Veeam looked at the confidence in the ability to recover before an attack and what happened to that confidence to be able to recover next time after an attack. And it kind of highlights a bit of a gap here. So after an attack, the confidence in being able to recover from an attack dropped by 20%. So that means there was a lot of organizations who thought, yeah, we should be okay. And then it happened, and it wasn't okay. All right, so just to look at the key takeaways. And this is becoming a bit of a cliche, so I'm sorry, but cyber attacks, it is a question of when and not if. And when an attack does occur, the backups are at risk. That's where the criminals are going after. It creates a huge disruption in the business. And again, I'll talk about that in just a second. Not just in terms of how long it takes to recover, but how much data you can recover and the impact of the people working in that organization, particularly the IT team. Businesses are thinking, I should be okay. but they might not be. And finally, the technologies and tools, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put this down here, may not be up to the job. Now, I said that I would tell you about an example. So I talk here about cyber attacks. It's when and not if. So there are often very high-profile ransomware attacks in the press. So, for example, in my native UK, Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, Harrods, right? The big names. But what we don't so often hear about are the smaller businesses. So I was reading this morning about a transport company from Northamptonshire in England, 710 employees, 178 years old. I guess they were using horses and carts before. They got hit by a ransomware attack in 2023. Estimated ransom demand was 5 million. They couldn't pay it. They had cyber insurance. They couldn't do their reporting. They went out of business. 710 people lost their jobs. Right? Old family company, just wiped out. The ransomware gangs don't care if you're a hospital, if you're an SMB, if you're a corporate. They don't care. They will just go after anybody. So just bearing in mind those rather depressing numbers and facts, clearly data resilience and therefore business resilience is needed. So what's the answer? Okay, so zero trust was a huge step forward and first proposed by Forrester in 2010, 15 years ago. And it was an enormous step forward away from the old approach of, patrolling the perimeter and trying to keep the bad guys out. In a zero trust model, you assume breach. You assume that the bad guys are already in, and therefore it's more about how do you stop them from spreading sideways and going and causing further damage. So the first thing is that you start segmenting your business systems up as much as possible. So you maybe create a segment for your credit card processing, another for your HR, another for your ERP, another for your backups. And then for each of those segments, you make sure that every time there is an attempt to access the data in that segment, it's verified explicitly each time. So both in terms of multi-factor authentication and identity access management. So each attempt, yes, no. And also that least privilege access is applied. So for every access attempt, you give access just enough and just in time to get the job done. Well, this is great, but there is a problem here. And that problem is in this box with a backup infrastructure. Because if cyber criminals got the credentials to get into your backup infrastructure and it's one single set of credentials to access everything, then your backups are toast. That's it. Game over. Like the company that we talked about before. So this is why the zero trust model really needs to be evolved. And in fact, Veeam themselves, they teamed up with Number Line Security, who are a security expert company, and they built out an extension to Zero Trust, which is called Zero Trust Data Resilience. So it takes those 3 core pillars, and then it adds 3 additional pillars. So firstly, segmenting explicitly the backup software and the backup storage. So that's number 1. The second is creating multiple resilience zones. So that means not just one set of backups, but you have 2 sets of backups in different places, different media. We'll come to that in a moment. And the third is about immutability. So immutability means once the data is written, you can't delete it, you can't amend it. But as we'll see in a minute, there's immutability and there's immutability. I'm beginning to think that this uses gesture control. Do I maybe have to stand like this? Okay. So let's see how zero trust data resilience could be applied in a backup environment. And it's fairly busy, but I'll talk you through this. So over on the left here, this is your production environment. And it's probably a mix of physical, virtual, hybrid cloud, all of that good stuff. And the attack surface here is huge because you've got so many systems here, so many ways for attackers to get in. And then next up, you've got your backup software. And again, there's a whole bunch of different attack surfaces that an attacker could use to try and get into your backup software. So this is why we have this funny little bug here, which is assuming that the bad guys are already in. You're already infected in your production software, your production environment. You're also infected in your backup environment. So if we then assume that the backup environment has been breached, it makes perfect sense then to separate out the backup storage and to minimize the attack surface as much as possible. And it also makes sense. So there's a couple of there's our first pillar right there, separating the software from the storage. And our second pillar of multiple resilience zones, of separating out your storage into different zones. So let's talk a little bit about that now. So I guess a lot of people will be familiar with the old 3-2-1 rule. So 3 copies of the data, 2 separate media, and 1 is off-site. Well, 3-2-1-1-0 takes that a couple of steps further. So in addition to those first 3 steps, one of those copies should be either air-gapped or immutable. Air-gapped is fine, but it makes it difficult to, for example, test that data, those backups, and make sure that you could recover from them. So let's say that it needs to be immutable. And then the 0 on the end is 0 failures or errors. And that means you need to be able to test your backups regularly. And again, tapes, not so easy. They may be nicely secured in the IT manager's car as they drive back every night, not forgetting to take them out of the car so they bake in the car the next morning, all of that stuff. But it's difficult to test that the backups are still working. So that's covered 2 of our pillars where we talked about separating the backup storage from the backup software. We talked about multiple resilient zones. And now let's talk a little bit more about immutability. And I said that, there's immutability and there's immutability. Well, immutability means nothing if somebody has the access rights to, for example, perform a factory reset on a machine. Or if it's built on a VM and somebody has the access rights just to completely delete that VM, it's not immutable. Immutability means nothing if it can be compromised with a breach. So absolute immutability means it doesn't matter which credentials somebody has. If they get access to your system, they still can't perform destructive actions. Can't delete your backups. So that's absolute immutability. So how do you achieve that? Well, we believe there are 3 key ways to do that. And the first is S3 storage, because S3 has native immutability. It's built into the protocol. Another reason S3 is great, it's an open standard. It's been tested, tried and tested by the industry for many years, principally as a cloud architecture, but now also as on-prem. And it can, because it's an open standard, it can be tested independently. Okay? The second point here about 0 time to immutability. If your backup data is hanging around for a while before it is written to immutable backup storage, it's open to threats. So if it sits on a landing zone that's not immutable, it's open to threats. If it's based on a snapshot that's taken minutes, perhaps, after the data has been written, and that's your immutable copy, it's not immutable. It's not 100% safe. And then the third point here is about a purpose-built target appliance. So having a separate purpose-built appliance that is designed specifically to store backup data means that, first of all, you've got that required separation from the backup software to increase your resilience. And secondly, you don't have to worry about do-it-yourself solutions, building out a repository on a server that you have lying around in the office, and will you stop advancing? Building your own, having to take the risk and the responsibility for security and patching and making sure the hardware is in step with the software and everything else. DIY is a high-risk approach. So we believe that by implementing these three core requirements, whether it's an insider threat or a ransomware attack from externally, or somebody just accidentally deleting all your VMs and all of your backup storage, you can get absolute immutability and you can get true resilience. Okay, so now a little bit about us and a little bit about Veeam. So I think a lot of people have heard of Veeam, biggest backup software company in the world, hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide. So when you put Veeam and ourselves into this architecture, you can see how the whole thing becomes simply resilient and absolutely immutable. So we still have this big threat surface here, but here's Veeam with their backup software, and they are scanning all of those inputs into the backups for threats. They're looking for unusual activity. They're looking for directories that are growing much larger, much quicker than expected, or anything unusual there. So there's already some good scanning going on there, but we still assume that there is a breach. So this is where our appliance comes in, and it's a physical, purpose-built hardware appliance. It's called OOTB, which stands for out-of-the-box immutability. So it's designed to do one thing and do it very, very well, and that is to back up Veeam data. So OOTB can sit in a primary data center as your primary backups, your performance tier. So you could back up from this incredibly quickly, up to 4 gigabytes per second. But it could also sit in a second tier, either in a secondary data center that you have. It could be in a service provider. Or you could be backing your own data up to the cloud as a secondary repository. So I'm going to wrap up now, nice and early, so you can all get to lunch. But just to say, the key takeaways that I want you to take away, firstly, assume breach, prepare for recovery. Second thing, guard your backups. They are your best and your last line of defense. Okay, so take those two things away. You can come and see us at our booth. We're right over that way, towards the other side. And we can tell you about our OOTB appliance. We can give you a demo, show you how it's secure, simple, and powerful. 15 minutes box to backup. Oh, and we've got great swag and Legos and all of those things as well. So whether you come and see us for the product or you come for the swag, just come along. Okay, that's me. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm going to hang around here in case anybody has any questions for the next 10 minutes. Thank you.